Welcome to the EQ Video Tip. I'm your host, Eric Forsetter. As always, thanks for joining for another terrific edition of this week's EQ Video Tip. Before we jump in, let's review the goals of EQ Video Tip. What's on tap for today? We've got a great show. It comes to us from Dave Smallin, who talks about habits and conversations that we need to break. And these habits are things that can ruin the flow of a conversation. It can easily distract or disrupt a meaningful conversation. In fact, it can leave our partner who we're talking with feeling invalidated because we did something that basically took away from the meaning of their conversation and tried to drive it towards ours or towards something else that doesn't matter altogether. Let's jump into the tips that Dave has for us. Tip number 1, interrupting. I'm terrible at it. I always want to interrupt. I always jump in. But it's something that we can do, and it's just tough to cut someone off mid-sentence. When you cut someone off mid-sentence, it destroys the flow. It conveys a sense that the partner doesn't really care what the other person is saying. So it's so important to try to bite our tongues, just listen as well as we can. And if you do end up interrupting, you could say something like, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, or I keep doing that, I promise, I'm really paying attention, I just have so many good things that I want to add to your story. Remember, try your best not to interrupt. Tip number 2, story topping. We all want to relate to the person that we're talking to, the story that they're telling us, but if they climb to a big mountain or they had a terrible day, it doesn't help for us to say, well, we went to a bigger mountain, or our day was even worse, our experience was more intense, our view was more beautiful. Things like that actually make the other person feel worse about what they're doing. And it's viewed as competition as opposed to trying to be empathetic and relate to that. So our motivation usually isn't to impress, but rather to relate. And when you're talking to someone, try to relate to them as opposed to trying to make it a story topping competition. Tip number 3, bright siding. What do we mean by that? Well, we want to support someone, but sometimes you want to say, well, look at the bright side, at least you have your health, or look at the bright side, you've got a great job, or look at the bright side, whatever it might be. And that's okay. We do want to be positive, but we also want to respect someone's feelings. If they had a terrible experience or something bad happened to them, or they're down, or they're sad, or they have anxiety, grief, anger, whatever that type of feeling is, it's okay for us to validate that experience without making it a bright side thing. It's important for you to listen, to understand it, be empathetic, and then you can put a little positivity behind it, but don't try to bright side everything because it's important to validate the other person's feelings. Our next tip, being right and being all-knowing. While they're similar, they're a little different, but being right all the time, that can be a little off-putting. If you really think you want to connect with someone, you don't always have to look to disagree with them, but don't look to poke holes in someone's story. You actually want to give them an opportunity to talk about what they want and be empathetic and understanding as opposed to being right. Maybe their opinion isn't correct, but it's okay just to hear them out and understand that side. It's also important not to be all-knowing. No one wants to be with a know-it-all all the time. And even if you have the expertise, it's sometimes good just to listen to the other side of the story. Or it may be that the other person knows more about a subject than you, and you want to interject and feel like you know everything when you may not have all the right answers. It's important to share a piece of knowledge, but if you're doing that, check with others about the accuracy and the fluency behind it before you actually jump in and just become that all-knowing person or that be right person all the time. Our last tip, advising. And this is a great one. Sometimes people just want to talk to you. I know I'm guilty of this. People come to me with a problem. I want to go solve the problem or give them advice. When in fact, they just want to be heard. They want to be listened to, and they want to be able to say, hey, I'm trying to do this. I think I'm doing the right thing. And they want to talk it out themselves. They are not necessarily looking for advice as often as they're trying to understand, are their emotions okay? And can they have someone give them empathy as to what they're going through rather than information? It's so important to think about that because when you think about someone who's talking to you, be empathetic, listen to what they're saying. Don't necessarily give them advice. Ask them, how can I help, as opposed to offering that advice right away. That's a wrap for this week's EQ video tip. Hopefully these tips are helpful to you and things that you can interject into your conversations or not interject into your conversations on a go-forward basis. So that concludes our EQ video tip for today. Try incorporating some of these tips into your daily routine. But remember, use what works best for you and personalize it for yourself. Thank you always to our great research team for providing us with some great tips today. As always on EQ Video Tip, we want to end with gratitude. So thank you for watching. We really appreciate it. Here are some resources that you can use if you want more information on EQ going forward. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you.